Ah, a new Doom. So, violent, circle strafing, dragons, turret sections, a really slow mech. Hang on a minute. Doom, are you feeling okay? This seems wrong. I've even heard a few people describe you as a console game, which, must be wrong. You're Doom, right? So, another day, another new video game. And rather than reviewing Doom, I'm gonna analyse a comment that I've heard made about it a few times where people have been calling it a console game. Now, for the uninitiated, console game used to be an insult thrown around by PC gamers discussing that a game had been simplified to make it fit on consoles better. Back in the day, console games used to have to be simpler. Controller inputs weren't as good, hardware restrictions, all kind of reasoning. As things have moved on, this is a little bit of an archaic term now. There are plenty of games that run perfectly well on all platforms, and there are very few genres now that I would say are favour either the PC or the console specifically. Now, the best example of this dumbing down would be Halo. It was very deliberately designed to be a slower paced game with simpler controls, a reliance on grenades, that kind of thing. But even Halo now has been sped up, so it's a bit of an outdated insult. But I thought we'd have a look at why people are saying this about Doom, of all things, the progenitor of the shooter, always associated with PC. So, let's have a little bit of a delve into what made a console shooter. So, the big thing that was criticised, especially when I was growing up, from the PC crowd against console shooters was two weapon limits. Now, Dark Ages doesn't have that, thankfully, to be fair. I think if a Doom came out with a two weapon limit, we'd all be having flashbacks to Duke Nukem Forever. But what about that slowing down? So the Dark Ages is definitely a slower game than Eternal. Equally, I think if they'd made it faster than Eternal, it'd be pretty much unplayable. So that may have been necessary, and Dark Ages was in the horrific position of having to follow Doom Eternal, which was always going to be a hard act to follow. You don't release 10 out of 10 back to back for eternity. So it'd have tried some new things. Some of it I think lands quite well, and some of it not so much. So the parrying, that is the primary combat system change, that I think has slowed the whole game down overall. This I like as an idea. The concept of parrying in a first-person shooter, I enjoy. There have been a few other games that have tried it, but Doom's making a decent hash of it. I do think it's a bit oversimplified and underutilized. You can parry the green projectiles, and only the green projectiles, and they're quite slow and really predictable in movement, which doesn't really fit with Doom. I would be thinking I should be able to parry, almost everything, maybe a couple of special counters. Games like Sekiro and Wulong taught us that actually being able to parry pretty much anything is far more organic in gameplay than it being one very specific move that is telegraphed 3 hours before it actually happens. So the parrying is simple. It's very simple. It's quite satisfying. The punch and the noise. I mean, Doom's sound design has always been top of the league, and it continues to be. But I'd have liked to see more complex patterns. I quite like the quite broad window in the chaos of a big fight. It's quite nice that the window is quite forgiving. But I'd have just liked more irregular patterns and enemies to attack faster, so I'm actually having to react to things. At the moment, it's very, I see a green attack, I'm going to move to it and parry it, which isn't the best way of playing a game, at least not in my opinion. But this hasn't slowed the game down enough for me to be comparing it to Call of Duty and Halo and all of the other console shooters that used to get utterly butchered by the PC crowd that grew up on the original Doom. So, what else is leaning this down, this kind of console criticism? I think I can put my finger on it, and I think that's probably going to be remembered as its big misstep for Doom the Dark Ages. And that is, Doom shouldn't have this much emphasis on story. It's Doom. Now, I'm not in the crowd of gamers that says story doesn't matter. Story is quite important in a video game, and depending on the game, there are even situations where a good story and serviceable gameplay is enough to make a really good game. But not in the case of Doom. Doom should be gameplay first. It has always sold itself on being gameplay first. So I'm at a bit of a loss to this decision. It was starting to creep in Eternal. There was a lot more lore being thrown around. And looking at the Dark Ages, there's a lot of lore, and with the lore and story comes set pieces. So, set pieces. These were the bane of everyone's existence if you grew up in the kind of late PS2, early PS3 era, kind of tail end of the noughties, that kind of area. They were everywhere. Now, thankfully, Doom has avoided the curse of QTEs, which, I think we have all learnt that QuickTime events are not the greatest thing to add to your game. I don't think my thumbs are ever going to forgive me for some of the games I used to play. I'm pretty sure that's why they're so sore these days. Now, Doom set pieces are at least managing to be fairly spectacular, but mechanically they are so dull. I'm reminded of a section where I'm sitting on a turret, spraying bullets at a large demon that is very slowly coming towards me, and every now and then I can fire a big energy blast and demon goes backwards. This is so dull. Infinite ammo on a gun, just sort of take the trigger down and launch the big energy blast thing every time the bar fills up. This really isn't that different to a QuickTime event, and I don't get what it's adding. It's not adding a huge amount to the story. There's a little bit of dialogue they can give, but where I'd much rather be running around this huge demon nipping at its ankles with Super Shock, would be far more fun. And with these set pieces has come the wonderful vehicle section to Doom. Now, in the trailers, the sort of Doomslayer hopping aboard his dragon to go and wreak havoc on the demons looks really cool. And I could see a world in which it was implemented really well. Unfortunately, 'tis not the world we live in. And flying around on the dragon is kinda clunky. It almost feels like it's on rails. It isn't quite, but it does kind of feel that way. The speed boost is nice, but I just don't feel like it's been used to its best. And again, infinite arrow turret, just fly around, take the fire trigger down, and then tell me those timed dodges aren't basically a quick time event. That's definitely how they feel. It's all really oversimplified. Whereas I could see the dragon could have been used to far greater effect. If we'd had massive battlefields that we could hop on and off the dragon at will to move around and strategically get behind the enemy and that kind of stuff. That could have fitted really well with Doom gameplay. This sort of set piece, get on the dragon, do the bit on the dragon, go blow a ship up, fall out the ship, land on the dragon, fly the dragon to the next ship. It's so predictable and so, I hate to say it, boring. Which is a shame, because the moment-to-moment foot combat of Dark Ages is really good. So why do you keep taking me away from it to put me on the dragon to go and fly around? And it's not that often it happens, or for that long. But it's just an interruption. If it had only happened once, I'd have possibly just gone, yeah, well, they decided to put a set piece in, and I can live with it. But it happens slightly too often that they were sort of thinking it was a mechanic. And it's just not one I enjoy. I could see how it could be good, but it's just too simplified. It's not had long enough in the oven as a mechanic there. And then we get to the mech. Now, I like a mech as much as the next person. I have not infrequently watched Gundam. I enjoy MechWarrior. Mech games are fun. So why is the Doomslayer's mech not the fastest, most crazy, ridiculous mech out there? It's kind of slow, and basically you walk around and punch the enemy 4 or 5 times, do a special attack, and they fall over. Again, it's just bafflingly underbaked. mechs quite often, when they're compared against ground combat, especially in first-person shooters, feel like the shooter gameplay slowed down. That's generally what mechs do, because bigger, slower, etc. But not giving it a huge array of weapons to pick from, like the normal ground combat, just feels like a complete misstep. I'm a decent way through Dark Ages. I haven't quite made it to the end, but I'm about 2/3 of the way through. I've done a couple of missions involving the mech. Again, they're not that frequent, but frequent enough for me to go, it's not just a one-off set piece. And I've seen two guns that I've been able to use for like maybe 3 minutes in total with no switching. And it's just, this isn't Doom. And again, it's this sort of, I've got a slow-moving set piece that I'd almost expect from like a Call of Duty or a Gears of War. The absolute antithesis to what Doom is. And there seems to have been an awful lot of emphasis put on these, especially in the marketing and trailers. Both the mech and the dragon were huge bits in the marketing, and I'm sat there looking at them going, why? They're sort of incidental bits that show up and very much feel like padding. So I've had my whinge about the bits where I think there's been a little bit of a misstep. So too much story and a fairly big emphasis on these weird set piece bits that just feel kind of dull in comparison. But let's actually get into whether this would be considered a console game. Now, while these are things that were very ubiquitous with console games, the Call of Duty campaign is the thing that immediately springs to mind, but Halo and turret sections were not uncommon. Vehicle sections, obviously, highly associated with games like Halo. But are they necessarily the bad thing, the awful dumbing down? Well, no, because the actual moment-to-moment combat is perfectly complicated enough. It's a little bit simpler than Doom Eternal's, but again, you're following Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal was absolutely phenomenal. But I wouldn't have said the combat is any simpler than, say, Doom 2016's, which is a probably fairer bar to set it against, rather than the sort of widely beloved masterpiece that was Doom Eternal, or still is Doom Eternal. So it's not necessarily that the combat has been dumbed down, but there has been this shift to it being more, dare I say, cinematic, and them actually wanting us to care about characters, and the Doomslayer actually showing some emotion, which I kind of thought went completely against his character of, I want to split demons in half and collect small collectible toys. I thought that was kind of the point of the character. So it's definitely a departure in sort of narrative and framing and theming. I think that's where it's gone wrong. But Doom has been here before. So let's go back in time a little bit to Doom 3. The last time he'd made a sort of massive innovation and change in style to the Doom series. So Doom 1 and 2, we're going to ignore Doom 64 because I know that's a little bit weird and I did not grow up on an N64, so it's not a game I'm that familiar with. So Doom 1 and 2 came out, were brilliant, revolutionised the FPS genre, basically invented the FPS genre, let's face it, we all used to call everything a Doom clone. And what do you do next? Well, you've got these big polygonal 3D engines out now, and some competition, so you're going to make the most of it. And what bit of Doom do you lean into? Well, Doom is about being alone, killing demons in hell, so we lean into the horror. And that brings us to Doom 3. Now, Doom 3 was widely criticised when it came out as a major departure from Doom's roots, being much darker. The lighting engine is memed about to this day, and just generally slower in pace. Now, that didn't mean the combat was dumbed down. The combat was as good as ever. If you've ever played Doom 3, the combat is still quite good. But the theming is not the same as those earlier games, and I think this is where Dark Ages is going to come unstuck and may actually be looked on a lot more favourably in a few years' time. Doom 3 now is considered a classic, while a little controversial in a few of the decisions it made. Generally, it's considered to be a good shooter, and especially when boomer shooters weren't everywhere, Doom 3 was a good one to go back to if you were sick of Call of Duties and Halos and everything influenced by the big console shooters. So, Doom has done this before, and id have been in this position before. They've tried to innovate. Dark Ages is trying to change something up in Doom. Because basically, if they did another Doom Eternal, it would have been another Doom Eternal. That they're not going to improve upon that. That style and systems of gameplay, I don't think they're ever going to make any better until there is a major innovation in the FPS genre, which will be in 10 years or more. So, Dark Ages is an attempt to innovate, and I think mechanically it succeeds, but is a little bit too easy generally. They haven't had the confidence they had with Eternal to push the new mechanics. It is entirely possible, from what I've played of Doom the Dark Ages, to kind of ignore the parry mechanic and just kind of run around and miss stuff. There's the odd attack where it is the best option, but generally you can avoid them just as easily as you can reflect them. And while it's handy for extra damage, it's not essential, where it kind of needs to be. The omission of glory kills is baffling to me, because that was always quite a cool part. They were done really well, the animation was really slick, it was quick. It's not any quicker to have the just boot the enemy across the map that we do now. It's just less spectacular, and that's just kind of brings the whole thing down. And that's a general consensus with mechanics, is it's just lower key than the new Dooms have been. So, returning to our overall question of, is Doom the Dark Ages a console game? Well, no more than Doom Eternal was, which I think everyone can agree isn't dumbed down in the slightest. Yeah, okay, it's playable on console, but so is everything now. Like, controllers have moved on. The footage you're seeing in the background of this is from PS5. It's my preferred platform for games that weigh on the hardware a little more. My laptop tends to sound like it's going to fly around the living room if I try to run something too flashy on it. So, yeah, it runs as well as you would anticipate, and as a but has it been dumbed down? Well, it's not been dumbed down. Mechanically, it's still quite a complex shooter. There's still a lot of mechanics to wrap your head around. But there's a lot less confidence from id in how much you should be using them. So, to, again, compare it to Doom Eternal, that's what came out last, even though that's not the fairest comparison because of what Doom Eternal was. To play that game, didn't matter on the difficulty, didn't matter how you set it up, you needed to swap weapons, use glory kills, use everything in your arsenal. There was no way you were getting through it if you didn't learn what everything did and at least try to use all of them. Dark Ages, I have found I can get through quite a lot of the game just running around with Super Shotgun, which was something we know they tried to get away from in Eternal. So they're not as confident in their presentation, and I think that's why the filler is these weird set-piece things that are just kind of take the trigger down and zone out, rather than sticking to the frantic gameplay. Someone wasn't as confident in something about Doom the Dark Ages mechanics to push it. And I think that's a shame, because I think it could have been a lot better. I think it could have been a lot cleaner. The story being pushed, that was happening in Doom Eternal a bit. I didn't like it then. I don't overly like it here. It's Doom, but again, you can always skip cutscenes if you're that bothered. I have been following it vaguely on my playthrough. It seems like a fairly generic kind of action fantasy-esque story. Nothing too special. It can't say it's hooked me. They seem to be trying to give the Doomslayer a little bit more kind of emotion and investment in proceedings, which again seems like a misstep, but story is very, 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 very up to the reader's decision as to how good or bad they feel it is. But mechanically, the potential was there, it just wasn't seized. Now, I have spent however long this video has been going on for ranting about Doom the Dark Ages. I'm also going to turn around and say it's a perfectly good game. Don't take this as you shouldn't play it, you shouldn't enjoy it. It's a good game. It's a lot of fun. It's just not another game on the same level as Eternal. It was never going to be. There was always going to be a drop. But I think it's been just lack of confidence. I don't think console game in the connotation that's used is fair, because it's not been dumbed down to that level, even close. But there just seems to be a lack of pushing the player in the way Doom Eternal did. This has been a long ramble about Doom. Hope you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more. I'll see you next time.